I make original manga and anime style stories for a living, and big companies pay me hella money just to do so. But before all this, I was a finance bro, slaving away at banks, sometimes working weekends, and wondering if this was how the rest of my life was gonna play out. I finally ended up quitting my job in finance when my anime side gig was actually making more money. But the real question was, how did I balance both at the same time? Recently, one of the mentees in my creator kind of mentorship program asked me this exact question. How do you balance a full-time job while making manga at the same time? A lot of my Patreon and just DMs that people have, reached out to me have all asked the same thing. So I thought I'd make a video on it, and it got me really thinking. There's a super important lesson behind how I managed to balance a 70-80 hour work week, which is almost double the amount of a normal 40-hour work week, and still manage to build my creative career as a professional manga, webtoon, and anime creator. So I thought in this video I would get into one, my backstory, how I ended up in finance, two, like the shift in how I managed to break free from that kind of like 8 to 8 work week, and sometimes also working weekends. I'm also going to be talking about like what are the key takeaways, because that might not apply to everyone, but also what are the key takeaways and lessons that I learned from that experience that I think can apply to a lot of people if you are interested in pursuing manga and anime and webtoon or even any sort of creative venture, while also, hedging your risk by, having a typical 9 to 5. And so this video is going to be a lot about like that sort of time management and how I managed to do that. But before we get into that, please smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It really helps us out. It's a free way to support the channel. And subscribe if you're interested in learning more about the educational side of the anime, manga, webtoon industry. And yeah, let's get right into the video. So to understand how I got into this position of making multiple original series, working with large IP holders in the manga, anime, webtoon space, and soon in the anime space, we need to go back in time to when I graduated from NYU with a degree in economics and computer science. Then I went on to work in finance at a big consulting firm. And I was putting in, roughly 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. a typical work day, and occasionally working on weekends as well. After 8 p.m., what would typically happen is, I would close my work laptop, I would open up my personal work laptop, and I would start writing. That's when I ended up, locking in projects such as Icarus Rising, which was the most read project during the Shonen Jump Tezuka 100. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, my previous video talks a little bit about that Shonen Jump contest where the creators of One Piece, Dragon Ball, and stuff all read the project that we submitted. But that project got viral with over 4 million reads, ended up getting me a lot of other opportunities in this space, such as God Game, which now has like over 30 million reads, and Just a Goblin as well, which has over 20 million reads on Webtoon. And these are both picked up by major publishers. And I was doing all those projects, every script, every chapter, at the same time as I was working a 70 to 80 hour work week in finance. But before I even get into that, I do want to preface that I don't necessarily recommend doing what I did to everyone else. I'm going to tell you guys the story and what you can learn from it, but what I was doing wasn't necessarily the most healthy, and it also wasn't necessarily what I would recommend everyone else to do if they want to pursue the same path, right? It does take a certain amount of like grind and sacrifice to even do, and sometimes when I look back on it, I'm like, how did I even do that? But I do think that there are some high-level lessons that we can learn from my experience. So after I was working in finance for a year or two, I realized something that's really core, which was I was absolutely freaking miserable. I was so miserable, and sure, I was learning really valuable skills, soft skills that I would take on to, now have really helped me progress my career, like pitching, communication, managing clients, managing other people as well. And those are all, contributed skills to how my career is now. But I knew that the finance bro life wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do forever. Now, I had been publishing novels since I was 14 years old. Literally, I published my first novel when I was 17 with Age of Darkness. It's on Amazon, you can read it. It's not as good as anything I could produce now, but I was 17 and 14 when I wrote it. And I had generated a small audience of around 40,000 followers on social media for my work by the time I was in my early 20s. And so my passion was always there. I'd been writing and creating manga since I was in kindergarten and trying to sell it to kids for quarters on the playground. So I was always interested in this dream. I knew this dream was there and sort of felt unattainable when I was going to college, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to pursue. And when I was in finance, I was trying to figure out a way how I could bridge my day job to my dream, which was working in anime, manga, webtoon, and creating my own original stories. It didn't even have to be in those mediums. It could be in novels, it could be in games. I didn't care. I just wanted to write for a living. And so that's what I entered what a lot of people call their like grind season. For 2 years, from ages 22 to 24, I went sort of extreme. I completely focused on building my creative career. So I sacrificed a lot, right? I sacrificed my social life. I sacrificed my weekends. I sacrificed partying. I sacrificed going out for drinks, going out for dinner, everything. I didn't do any of that for 2 years. It's kind of crazy. And my routine was, when I think back on it, like kind of brutal. So again, just to go through it, it was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. was my finance job on average. Sometimes I would work a little bit later. Sometimes I would get off a little bit earlier. Who knows, but that's the average, right? Then from 8 to 9 p.m., I'd have like an hour to do dinner, maybe go to the gym for 20 minutes, make sure that I'm like physically healthy and eating well and all that stuff. And then from 9 p.m. to 1 or 2 a.m. every single day, I would work on my creative work. So that is anything from the marketing side, which is making TikToks about my work, or anything from like actually doing the writing or doing the networking in the space, right? And so that's like a lot of writing, a lot of networking, a lot of marketing, all that stuff. I was doing all of it, right? And then on the weekends, if I didn't have my finance bro work, I would spend the entire day, a full work day, working on my creative stuff. And that's also, I would maybe do like an 8 to 8 situation. And then in that free time, I would maybe spend time reading or watching anime. Because, in this space, the creative fields, consumption also helps to fuel creation. So I try not to consume more than I create too much these days because I've already consumed a lot, but I still try and make time for that consumption. So for 2 years, I had no breaks, no vacations, didn't see my friends, didn't see anyone for 2 years. And my mindset was really simple, right? It was like, if I sacrifice 2 years, just two, out of my total life, then I can change the trajectory of my life forever. That was my sort of goal. And it worked. Today I'm one of the top writer-producers for this type of work in the United States. So in my country in particular. If you're not in the US, you probably don't care. But that came from literally snapping 2 years of my life out of existence. And during that time, all I did was work and create. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I thought this worked, but also there's some context that you probably have to understand why it did work for me and why, if you just copy that same mindset, it might not work for you, right? So one, I lived at home. So I moved home from New York. I went back to Connecticut, lived with my mom, had no distractions, didn't really have rent because I was living with my mom. And I understand that it's a very fortunate thing that I could have done. And yeah, I would just eat dinner, lunch, breakfast with my mom, pretty much. Which many people would say, hey, you're kind of a loser for doing that. But for me, I was like, yeah, like this is great. I can just completely focus. And my mom was so supportive of me during that time and just lock in, work, and hang out with my mom. That's pretty much all I did. Another contextual thing was that this was during COVID. So there's not like a lot of FOMO or societal pressure for me to go out. In fact, societal pressure would say, hey, stay home. So, if you try and do the same thing today, there's probably a lot more temptation because people are going out more. But yeah, I still felt a little bit FOMO just watching my friends go out once COVID started, once the vaccine and all that stuff started coming out. But I still locked in and still stayed at home during that period of time. Another context was industry-wise, anime, manga, webtoon was exploding in the US during COVID, and it was on the huge rise. And this is probably because we were all at home, all watching anime, Netflix was popping, webtoon was popping, and people were just consuming a lot more because there's not as much to do. And so that also gave me a lot more opportunities because I was an early mover in the space, in the US at least. Another context was that TikTok was also new in the US. I was posting like around 8 times a day during the time, using, content to build my name and career, and that sort of helped me get a lot of opportunities, viral opportunities that are not as common these days. So, I do want to give some context because, while the grind was very intense, there's also a lot of strategy behind it, but also a little bit of luck of being at the right place, right time. But I do want to go into what you can take away from my journey and everything that sort of I did. And it's like, one, people who are really interested in the space, I get some mentees that ask me this, but they're like, should I just quit my job and just go all in on my dream? I am quite risk averse, guys. I think that quitting your job and your day job to go all in on a career that you don't know is gonna work can be quite a scary thing. And not only that, it can actually pressure you in the wrong way. Instead, I think allocating a lot of your free time into your passion lets you build projects and build your creativity while your main job, which is your 9 to 5, can take away and alleviate a lot of the stress that comes with entrepreneurship and doing your own thing. So if you have financial burden, as an example, while you're building your early projects, let's say you're doing your first manga, right? And you quit your job to do manga full time and you're all in on manga. You have an enormous pressure now to make money, to make sure that this manga project pops as soon as possible. And in the creative fields, whether it's building apps or whether it's making your manga or making your movie or whatever it is, making your novel, that financial stress can add a pressure of time and add a pressure of needing to take lower amounts of risk so that creative risk so that you can go and do what makes money, for example, right? And that can impact your product in a negative way. So in my opinion, some people might disagree with me, but in my opinion, it's better to eradicate that financial burden and stress by keeping your job and instead make a temporary sacrifice in your personal life to pursue your dream. And I do want to emphasize that it's temporary, right? Not hanging out with your friends, not hanging out with your family or whatever for a couple of years so that you can lock in on your dream. People, I hope that if you have a good network and a good support system, that they'll support, hopefully, your decision to do so. Not all people are gonna have that network. I was very fortunate where my family supported, my doing this in my free time. Me convincing them to quit my job to eventually do this was a whole different story. And my friends were also very supportive because they always knew that this is what I wanted to do. Right, so they understand. They weren't like, "Hey, Brandon, come out to this party. You suck," all that stuff. Right? They were all very supportive, and it's all temporary. Right? If you set a timeline of "Hey, I'm going to do this, sacrifice for 3 years," it's not going to be so bad. And so, the second thing that I think you can take away is treating your creative works like a second career, and not necessarily like a hobby, can also be very helpful to your productivity. Right? Scheduling time into your calendar to make sure that you actually show up every single day to write or create or make videos or do whatever it is that your creative venture is. I think that's very helpful to make sure that you lock in every single day, and it really helps to hammer in that routine into your brain. It also helps the mentality that every single hour that you contribute to your own creative projects is one step closer to achieving the dream life that you want for yourself. It's also is building the skills and career that you want for yourself, right? And so I think that always having that mentality of, hey, this is not just a hobby for me, but this is also if I want it to be my career, I'm gonna treat it as a second career, can help you really lock in and just also really just treat it like it is. It's gonna be a job for you. If you want it to be a job eventually, then you should start treating it like a job and be really serious about it. I think step number a third takeaway can be really focusing on the long-term goal, right? Sacrificing, for me, I was in my early 20s, but sacrificing, a few years to change the entire trajectory of my life was not a bad sacrifice. If I had to do it again, I would, 100%. No, I wouldn't even blink about it. I always thought that life was too short to do something that you hate for most of your day or something that isn't your calling for most of your day. And of course, everyone has different circumstances, but if you think of the dream life that you want, and if you want it to happen, I think that locking in on those baby steps and making those steps towards your goal in whatever free time you have is just the best thing that you can do to slowly make that progression towards the life that you want. And I think that, the fourth takeaway is gonna be that there's really no perfect time. When I think about it, I've been writing anime, manga, webtoon stories my entire life. Like I said, I've been doing it since I was in kindergarten. I was writing fan fictions in first and second and third grade, fourth grade. I started writing my first original story when I was 14 and then continued and published it until when I was 17 and then continued to publish a new story every year from 17 to 22, until I had this lock-in period, right? And so my entire life has been pretty much just this, right? And so I can't think of doing anything else. When I think about it, it's this was something that I've wanted to do since I was 7, maybe even earlier. And, it just happened that all the pieces fell in at the right time. Anime is getting big, and it's bigger than it's ever been. But I've been working towards this my entire life. So, it just made sense because, being at the right place, right time. But I was always setting myself up to be in that particular area, right? So don't try and time it. Don't try and time the market. Think about what you want to do and just go for it, right? But yeah, I think those are all the key lessons that I sort of have to give to you guys, just looking back on my personal journey, doing this full time. I do want to wrap up the video really saying that my approach to chasing my dream worked for me, but it's not necessarily a healthy way for everyone. Some downsides that came out of it with, I actually came out of those 2 years being quite socially inept. I'm not even joking, because all I did was work, right? And I had no social interaction, so I actually had trouble making eye contact with strangers for, I want to say like 3 to 6 months after that, because I just had no social interaction because all I did was work for 2 years. And so, yeah, I mean, that is what it is, and that was like a slight sacrifice, slight setback. But, ultimately, you guys should do what works for you, right? You guys are not me, I'm not you, I don't know what you're going through, but hopefully these takeaways and these lessons can help, apply to whatever circumstance you guys are in. In my personal journey, this is a dream I had when I was a kid, and all it took was really like 8 years of doing it in my free time and 2 years of full sacrifice to get my full dream life that I have now. It wasn't easy, but totally worth it for me, and I don't regret any experience at all. Well, again, this is a long video, but if you have one takeaway, it's gonna be that if you have a dream life, it doesn't have to be a dream. All you have to do is take action in your free time and make that progress towards that life one step at a time. Hopefully this video and this journey helps to inspire you, even if it's just a little. And if you're interested in, joining my one-to-one mentorship program, which is where I help creators that are trying to get this life in the manga and webtoon space in particular, you can shoot me an email. I'll drop it on screen. Or you can join the Patreon, which has all educational content around this space. This is all for the anime manga web space. Otherwise, keep watching the videos. They're all free. And yeah, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on next week's video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye. Boop.